I have a weight problem. It makes me sad.
After the movie, they sat there. He's gonna be dead soon.
Oh, that's so sad.
And they had a debate over how you're not just overweight, you're unhealthy overweight.
It will be some time before we know for sure what killed 33-year-old Chris Farley.
Now, still we got a great show tonight. Mighty Boston.
The man everyone loves is nearing the last days of his life. He has conquered TV and movies, making himself a household name. But he is struggling with his addiction in a very fast-paced lifestyle. For the last 30 years, he has been making people laugh from generation to generation. This is the king of the 90s, Chris Farley, in his last few months with us. When we catch up with Farley, he is just making his last appearance on SNL. This is a moment in time where the world will really see Chris for the last time. The year is 1997, October of that year. Chris has a little over a month left, but elements in his life are falling apart around him at a very fast pace. Chris's last time on SNL was short-lived. It's obvious he is not sharp with his lines. He's out of breath, and he's covered in sweat in every scene. In a way, the whole show that night is somewhat sad because the jokes revolve around Farley, his eating habits, his weight, and his substance abuse. Can he still even be the Farley he was in the early 90s? Although Chris has had a very productive year, some say he has recorded over 80–90% of the movie Shrek, and it looks like it's a wrap. But there are whispers still that Chris is having mood swings on set, disappearing, hanging around the wrong people. The people who love Chris are saddened by this. At this point, no one can stop what is coming.
They had a serious conversation, and after the movie, they sat there. He's gonna be dead soon.
Oh, that's so sad.
It's no secret that Farley is unhappy to the people around him. People to this day even say that he would randomly call them, wanting to get together, wanting to talk, showing signs of being lonely, seeking help, but not saying what for. Chris's last movie, Beverly Hills Ninja, would be a complete flop in theaters. Even Chris would admit that he was devastated by the role. Nonetheless, 1997 was still a very big positive year for Chris career-wise. He would work on 2 more films, Almost Heroes and Dirty Work. These films would come out the following year in '98 after his death. Almost Heroes was a full-length movie starring Chris, and in Dirty Work, he would make a few small cameos. It's said that while on set of Dirty Work, Chris was not in the best of moods. But the biggest one of all that no one saw coming, even Chris, would be the role of Shrek. If Chris would have lived to finish this movie and see what it had become, who knows how this would have impacted Chris and how he would have thought about his future more. It might have been the shift that he just needed to see. When Chris walked off the stage that night on Saturday Night Live in October of '97, that would be the last time the world would see Chris Farley. That would be the last time a lot of his friends would see him, hug him, and talk to him face to face. From this point on, Chris would dive right back into his lifestyle of drugs, beautiful women, and partying and abusing food. In Chris's life, he will seek treatment 17 times for weight problems and his drug addiction. One thing that we see in Farley a lot, in interviews and just with him being honest and real in conversations, is that Chris is a huge supporter of his family. It's no secret that Chris loves his father, who is a huge influence in his career, personal life, and just who he is as an overall man. Chris would always say the one person he wanted to make laugh more than anybody was his father. With Chris's drug abuse, it is obvious that he is ashamed of it, even claiming to be sober in October when he hosted SNL. But it's quite obvious before and during while Chris is on set of SNL, he is still using, and his health is scaring everyone. Chris would finally return to his home in Chicago on December 11th. The next 6 days of Chris's life would be unbelievable. When Chris first returned home in Chicago, it is said that he visited friends, going from bar to bar late at night, building up a very fast pace that would lead up into the last few days of his life, full of debauchery and substance abuse. But the last 48 hours of Chris's life would be even harder. Chris would take a shift from visiting his friends to visiting his friends that did drugs, sold drugs, and were more than likely not the right people to be around him. At this rate, Chris is going downhill very fast. Going into December 17th, this is when things would rapidly change. Chris has been binging for 6 days now, drinking, eating, and sleeping here and there with no particular schedule, massive amounts of drugs, and he is worn down. Now, with December 17th being Chris's last full day alive, it would somewhat mirror the day before, December 16th. Chris woke up late in the day and had a call girl come over. She said that Chris was smoking marijuana and drinking heavily, but also that Chris was irritated that she did not bring her own drugs to share. She also said that Chris was acting manic, going from room to room in his apartment, yelling and laughing. The last day of Chris's life is surrounded by many different stories from who, where, when, and when they saw Chris. On December 17th, an exotic dancer named Heidi would be the last person to see and spend time with Chris. Heidi would link up with Chris around 11 a.m. that morning at a party. They would spend the day together and eventually go to Heidi's apartment. Later that day, Chris would call his dealer to bring them drugs. When the dealer is at the apartment, he would snap a photo of Chris and Heidi. Pictures would later surface of Chris sitting at Heidi's table doing drugs. While Chris was sitting at Heidi's table, Heidi said that Chris took a hit of his drug, threw the chair back with his arms in the air, and the amount of force that Chris threw back caused the chair to go into the wall, leaving marks. While at Heidi's apartment, the two would also try to have relations but with no success. Chris had been up for 4 days, drinking and doing drugs. By 11 p.m. that night, the two would end up back at Chris's apartment, which was on the 60th floor of the John Hancock building in downtown Chicago. Heidi said she was getting very angry with Chris because he would not pay her the money she was owed to be with him all day. Chris would remark to Heidi several times, "A friend of mine is supposed to pay you." It was late at night, and Heidi had been with Chris all day. They would once again try to have relations at Chris's apartment, but still the same result as before. Heidi would continue taking pictures of Chris even at his apartment. She took one of the last photos of Chris conscious and standing on the phone, just hours before he would pass away. Heidi later said in an interview about that night that she asked Chris to stop doing so many drugs and slow down. Chris would just say he loved it. Heidi said that Chris was walking around the apartment, making phone calls, beating his chest, and saying that he just wanted to have one last fun time before his new movie came out, and he was forced to be clean. It was now around 3 a.m. that night. Chris was heavily induced with drugs at this point, and Chris and Heidi had been together for almost 17 hours straight, with no sleep, no rest, doing drugs and drinking. Around 3 a.m., Heidi left. She said that Chris stumbled around the apartment, fell down 10 feet from the door, and passed out. She could hear him breathing roughly, but Chris woke enough to say to her, "Please don't leave me." Heidi took one more picture of Chris, kissed him on the cheek, and left. As soon as Heidi walked out of Chris's apartment and shut the door, his fate was sealed. He was left alone on the floor with a different mixture of drugs in his system, and within minutes to an hour, Chris would overdose and suffocate. Chris was now deceased in his apartment alone. He would be found the next afternoon by his brother, John Farley. Chris was still in the same position and place where he died. John called 911, and Chicago firefighters responded to the call just a little after 2 p.m. Chris was pronounced dead at the scene. The mixture that killed Chris in the end was called a speedball, a mixture of cocaine and heroin. Weeks later, when the autopsy came back, it also revealed that Chris had a blocked artery, an enlarged heart, and his liver was in terrible condition. On December 23, 1997, Chris had a funeral in his hometown in Madison, Wisconsin. He had a service at Our Lady Queen of Peace Catholic Church. Over 500 people attended, including many of his dearest and closest friends and family. They gathered in the church to talk and remember the good times with Chris. Chris's old boss from Saturday Night Live was even in attendance. In the end, when it was all said and done, Chris's remains were put in a mausoleum close to where his family lives. To this day, he still rests there. It's important to remember that Chris was just a person with feelings and fears, just like any other person on earth who dipped his hand one too many times in the pleasures of the world. But but Chris is still loved and missed even more today than ever, and obviously will never be forgotten. Now that you've heard the traumatizing final days of Chris Farley, what was the cause to all of this and what led to it? The year leading up to Chris Farley's death in December 1997 was marked by a whirlwind of professional endeavors, personal struggles, and increasingly destructive behavior. Despite achieving significant career milestones, Farley's battle with addiction and mental health issues intensified, ultimately leading to his tragic demise. This period is a sobering reminder of how fame and success can often mask deeper, unresolved issues. Early 1997, a period of professional activity. In early 1997, Chris Farley was riding high on a wave of professional success. He was a household name, known for his time on Saturday Night Live, SNL, and his roles in popular films like Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. His comedic talent was undeniable, and he continued to be in demand for various projects. Farley was working on multiple films, including Beverly Hills Ninja, which had been released in January 1997. The film, though not critically acclaimed, performed moderately well at the box office and showcased Farley's signature physical comedy. Despite his success, Farley's off-screen life was spiraling out of control. His substance abuse, which included alcohol, cocaine, and heroin, was becoming increasingly unmanageable. Farley had been in and out of rehabilitation centers throughout the 1990s, but the cycles of sobriety and relapse persisted. His weight was also a significant issue. He struggled with obesity, which was exacerbated by his heavy drinking and overeating. Spring 1997, increasing health concerns. By the spring of 1997, Farley's health was visibly deteriorating. Friends and colleagues noticed that he was often out of breath, sweating excessively, and appeared generally unwell. His behavior on film sets became more erratic, with frequent absences and difficulty concentrating. Despite these challenges, Farley continued to work. He was involved in the production of Almost Heroes, a comedy set in the early 19th century, in which he starred alongside Matthew Perry. The film was shot in the spring of 1997, and Farley's condition raised concerns among the cast and crew. During this time, Farley's family and friends urged him to seek help. His brothers, particularly Kevin Farley, were vocal about their concerns. Chris Farley's relationship with his father, Tom, was also a significant influence on his life. Tom Farley had struggled with alcoholism, and Chris looked up to him immensely, often citing a desire to make his father laugh as a driving force behind his career. The parallels between Chris and his father's struggles with addiction were apparent, adding another layer of complexity to his situation. Summer 1997. Attempts at rehabilitation. In the summer of 1997, Farley made another attempt to regain control over his life. He checked into a rehabilitation center, seeking treatment for his addiction and weight issues. This was not his first stint in rehab, but there was hope among his loved ones that this time might be different. Farley was candid about his struggles, often expressing a desire to change and lead a healthier life. However, the pressures of fame and the deep-rooted nature of his addictions made sustained recovery challenging. During his time in rehab, Farley worked on addressing the underlying issues contributing to his substance abuse. He participated in therapy sessions and group meetings where he spoke openly about his insecurities and the pressures he faced in Hollywood. Farley's comedic persona often masked a deep sense of loneliness and inadequacy. These sessions provided him with some clarity and support, but the road to recovery was far from easy. Fall 1997, a return to work and public struggles. By the fall of 1997, Farley had left the rehabilitation center and returned to work. He was scheduled to host Saturday Night Live in October, marking his much-anticipated return to the show that had made him famous. However, the excitement was tempered by concerns about his health and sobriety. Farley's appearance on SNL in October 1997 was bittersweet. He was visibly out of shape, and his performance was erratic. Friends and colleagues later recalled that he seemed tired and out of breath, struggling to keep up with the demands of live television. Despite the challenges, Farley's return to SNL was a testament to his enduring talent and popularity. The audience welcomed him back with open arms, and his sketches received a positive reception. However, behind the scenes, Farley's substance abuse was taking a toll. He was reportedly using drugs and alcohol before and after the show, raising alarms among those close to him. The episode was a stark reminder of the fine line Farley was walking between success and self-destruction. Late 1997, the final months. In the final months of 1997, Farley's life became increasingly chaotic. He continued to work on various projects, including voice work for the animated film Shrek. Farley had recorded a significant portion of the dialogue for the titular character, a role that would later be famously taken over by Mike Myers after Farley's death. His involvement in Shrek was seen as a potential turning point, a project that could have marked a new chapter in his career. However, Farley's personal life was unraveling at an alarming rate. He was frequently seen in Chicago, his hometown, where he engaged in heavy drinking and drug use. Friends and family noticed a marked change in his behavior. He was more isolated and erratic than ever before. Farley's attempts to reconnect with old friends often ended in late-night binges, and his physical health continued to decline. December 1997, the final weeks. As December approached, Farley's behavior became even more concerning. He had several run-ins with the law, including an incident in which he was found passed out in a Chicago club. These episodes highlighted the severity of his addiction and the toll it was taking on his body. Farley's friends and family were increasingly desperate, urging him to seek help once more. However, Farley was resistant, caught in a cycle of denial and dependency. In the final weeks of his life, Farley's condition deteriorated rapidly. He was seen in various states of distress, and his drug use intensified. Despite these signs, Farley continued to make plans for the future. He spoke about upcoming projects and expressed a desire to get his life back on track. Tragically, these plans would never come to fruition. The final week. In the week leading up to his death, Farley embarked on a 6-day binge that would prove fatal. He returned to Chicago and engaged in a relentless cycle of drinking and drug use. Farley visited numerous bars and clubs, often in the company of dubious acquaintances. His behavior became increasingly erratic, and his health visibly worsened. Friends and family were alarmed but felt powerless to intervene. The final days of Farley's life were marked by a series of increasingly desperate and reckless actions. He spent time with various individuals, including a call girl named Heidi, who later provided a detailed account of Farley's last hours. According to Heidi, Farley was heavily intoxicated, using drugs and alcohol in large quantities. He expressed feelings of loneliness and despair, a stark contrast to his public persona. On the night of December 17th, Farley and Heidi returned to his apartment in the John Hancock Center. Farley's behavior was erratic. He was making phone calls, taking drugs, and expressing a desire for one last good time before he had to clean up for his upcoming projects. In the early hours of December 18th, Heidi left Farley's apartment, despite his pleas for her to stay. Farley collapsed shortly after she left, and he was found dead the next afternoon by his brother John. Conclusion. The year leading up to Chris Farley's death was a tragic culmination of years of addiction, mental health struggles, and the pressures of fame. Despite moments of professional success and attempts at rehabilitation, Farley was unable to escape the destructive cycle that ultimately claimed his life. His story serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of addiction and the human cost of unaddressed mental health issues. Farley's legacy as a beloved comedian endures, but so too does the cautionary tale of his untimely death. Chris Farley was more than just a comedian. He was a force of nature whose energy and larger-than-life personality captivated audiences around the world. Born on February 15, 1964, in Madison, Wisconsin, Farley grew up in a large, loving Irish Catholic family. His early life was filled with humor and warmth, and it was here that he developed a passion for making people laugh. This passion led him to the Second City Theater in Chicago, where his unique brand of physical comedy and infectious enthusiasm quickly made him a standout performer. Farley's big break came in 1990 when he joined the cast of Saturday Night Live, SNL. On SNL, he created some of the most memorable characters and sketches in the show's history. Who could forget the motivational speaker Matt Foley living in a van down by the river, or his hilariously intense Chippendales dance audition alongside Patrick Swayze? Farley's ability to combine physical comedy with genuine heart made him a beloved figure both on and off the screen. Despite his professional success, Farley's life was marred by personal struggles. His battle with addiction was well documented, and he often used humor to mask his insecurities and pain. Farley sought comfort in food, alcohol, and drugs, which eventually took a toll on his health and well-being. His untimely death on December 18, 1997, at the age of 33, was a tragic end to a life filled with laughter and love. As we reflect on Chris Farley's legacy, it's essential to remember the joy he brought to countless people. His comedy was not just about making people laugh, it was about connecting with them on a deeper level. Farley's performances were marked by a genuine desire to make others happy, a trait that endeared him to audiences and colleagues alike. In tribute to Chris Farley, we honor the man who gave us so much joy and laughter. His ability to find humor in the everyday and to make us laugh until we cried was a rare gift. Farley's comedy was a reminder of the power of laughter to bring people together, to heal, and to uplift. Though his life was tragically short, Chris Farley's impact on the world of comedy and the hearts of his fans is timeless. He left behind a legacy of laughter and love that continues to inspire and entertain. Farley's story is a poignant reminder of the highs and lows of the human experience, and his memory lives on in the laughter he sparked and the hearts he touched. Long live Chris Farley, the man who made the world laugh. Thanks for watching.